There's many types of bias tape available for purchase. There's two main kinds. There's single fold bias tape that has 2 folds on either side for the raw edges. And then there's double fold bias tape that is folded twice. This is the most common kind. For the double fold bias tape, it comes in many different forms. By package, by the meter or yard, satin double fold, and even there's bias tape for outdoor furniture. Bias tape is usually used to cover up a raw edge of a fabric without hemming, or can just be adding a little pop of color to something. There's 3 names for the fabric. The weft will go to the width of the fabric. The warp will go parallel to the selvage edge and will be 90 degrees from the weft. Then there's the bias, which is 45 degrees between the two. Why is this important? This is a piece of woven cotton fabric. If I pull on the warp, there's not very much stretch on here. If I pull on the weft, there's a little bit, but not much more. If I pull it at the 45 degrees along the bias, there is a lot more stretch. This allows a lot more flexibility with the tape. It can go around curves. The secret to using double bias tape is in its construction. If you look very closely, you can see that the one edge is shorter ever so slightly from the back. The shorter edge will go on the front, the part that you sew. As you can see, there's just a little bit of a distance between the edge of the bias tape and the stitch. If we flip it over, there is a slightly larger gap between the stitch and the fold. When you sew the front, you will automatically sew the back. To make your own bias tape, there's little devices called bias tape makers that are available for purchase. I own 3. This one is the smallest one. I've only ever used it to make single fold. This is the one I use most often for my double folds. And this one, I haven't figured out what I'm going to make with it. To make bias tape, I have a little bit of a cheat. I go to a pattern that has a corset or something, and it usually comes with a binding pattern piece. It will show you the direction of the grain that you will line up with the fabric. You line up the arrow to go parallel to the selvage, and naturally the tape will be on the bias. Once you cut it out, I mark the location of where each line is, cut the alignment marker, Repeat the process for the other end. Then I connect the lines. I take the alignment markers, line them up and pin, and pin the rest of the edge. Next, sew a 5/8 seam along the edge. Once that's done, take your good scissors and cut along the line. When you reach the seam, just keep cutting. Now you have a bias piece of fabric. To make the bias tape, you feed it into the large edge of the bias tape maker. Sometimes I have to use a pin to help feed it through. And when it comes out, it's automatically folded. I usually do this over at my ironing board, and you chase it with your iron. Sometimes to keep it closed, I have to pin it. The faux suede was so stretchy I had to clamp this device to the ironing board. I've used bias tape in several different projects. With right sides together, line up the raw edges of the tape in your fabric and stitch it. Fold the bias tape over the fabric. To make a seemingly stitchless front, hand stitch the back and secure it down. But quite often, I will do a backwards technique. I will do the previous instructions, but on the wrong side of the fabric. Stitch and fold over. Flip it over and sew a nice seam on the front. The back will look not as nice, but the important thing is the front does. This also works for corsets. The front looks good. The back, the stitching looks a little off. But the important thing is the front. This was the result of me trying to sew the back and front at the same time. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Figure out what you're going to do with bias tape in your next project.